Dr. Stacey Shaw. Thank you so much for accepting to be a part of the FMI Highlight series. We really appreciate your time and your presence.
I'm honored to participate. Thank you for the opportunity to chat with you.
Thank you. So I will start with my first question, which is, can you tell us about your current work and how it connects to the field of forced migration?
Sure. Yeah, so there's three main areas that I'm focused on right now. One is in U.S. refugee resettlement, another is in Turkey, and the third is in Syria. So I'll just try to go through those briefly. In U.S. resettlement, I've done a number of projects over time, but right now our focus is on a survey that we conducted with Switchboard in 2023 or 2024, where we looked at worker experiences in resettlement. And following that survey, which had a pretty broad reach, we had close to 500 participants, we then conducted a series of qualitative interviews. And so we're analyzing those now and trying to understand workers' approach to resettlement during a time where there's a lot of change happening in resettlement, and what are some of their challenges and strengths and the ways that they do their work. So that's been a lot of fun to work in that with those questions and with that group of workers. I also was a resettlement worker in the past as a caseworker, and so I have a lot of care for the work that they do and the way that they approach the service that they're giving to refugee communities. The other area in Turkey, we've focused over the last couple of years on responding to the needs of Syrian refugees and looking at what are the challenges they're facing, how can we support their mental health, and understand what strategies might be best for addressing distress and increasing well-being. So I've worked with my colleague Asli Yalım, and also with an amazing local organization called ASAM in Turkey. Maybe you've heard of them. And we've implemented a series of group interventions with Syrian women, and we've found that meeting together and building skills around mindfulness and emotion regulation is really helpful for women in reducing distress. So we've actually been sharing some of those findings at the conference this week. And then the third area that I mentioned is in Syria. And this work was initiated by two of my colleagues in Utah who are from Syria and who are very passionate about finding ways to understand and respond to the regime change and see how women are doing now as there's so much change and hope for stability in Syria. So we've had a couple components of that project. My two colleagues were in Syria this last summer and able to conduct a series of interviews to meet with women and learn about their experiences, and really identified a lot of strengths and resilience and amazing ways that women coped through the very difficult conflict of the last decade and more. And then we're also working with a colleague in Germany from Syria who is helping us initiate a survey where we're trying to reach a larger group of women to better understand their needs. And we hope that this research will move towards future intervention work that we could do with Syrian women there. So some of those women, and most of them were displaced internally, but did not actually cross the border. So they wouldn't be considered refugees, but have still dealt with a lot of conflict and trauma over the last 15 years or so. So those are the three big kind of main areas right now where I'm focused.
Thank you so much for sharing. I see that you've been doing such important work both for refugees and internally displaced people, especially women, like who were like a wonderful group. Thank you so much for your work and for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for your interest. It's great to talk about it with
So,
you.
and my next question is actually related with that. So you have been successful in working with service providers and community members as a researcher. What drives your passion for this
Yeah.
work, and also what would you recommend for early researchers, early scholars, like who have maybe the same passion?
Yeah. I think having a personal connection to these issues can be very powerful. I have not experienced, being a refugee, but having the experience of working in resettlement as a caseworker was very powerful for me in helping me understand what the services are like, what the experiences of people are like who come to the US as refugees. And it also opened up in my mind a lot of questions that have continued to drive my research and work over the last years. And so I think kind of following those interests and questions and passions to be connected within a community, to get work experience, to be volunteering or interning or whatever it is that where you're sort of embedded in that work setting or that community setting can be very, very helpful and powerful for both understanding the issue and seeing what the relevant questions are, and also for developing partnerships. Um, Even though it's been many years since I've worked in those settings, I still have colleagues and connections in those agencies that have fueled my work since then. So I think that's one thought or suggestion I might share with younger scholars or early scholars. Another is just the importance of partnership in general. So finding colleagues, most of the research projects we do are complex and will have many different partners involved in different aspects of the project. So finding people that you can work with and that you trust is really important. And when a few years ago, I really wanted to get involved in Turkey. I had not worked there before, but I visited the country. I thought it was just amazing and beautiful. And I also knew that it was such an important place for understanding and responding to refugee issues and forced migration as a country that's hosting so many migrants. And so I reached out to my colleague, Asli, who I'd had some interaction with, but didn't know very well. And when we just started brainstorming and connecting and talking and finding ways to work together. And then I spent some time in Turkey. We found this, Asli had a connection to this organization. It's sort of one thing led to the next. But so developing those relationships and spending time, if you're not able to work for years in a place, you can at least spend that time to kind of build connections and relationships in person that will help you find projects and questions that'll be mutually beneficial. And for both Asli and I, when we found and developed this relationship with Assam, this wonderful organization, um, we had to develop projects that would be helpful to them as well as to us as researchers, and we had to be willing to learn from them as well as feeling like we're bringing some expertise and research perspective to offer. So it's very collaborative, and I think the social work skills and perspectives around community building and partnership and leadership and kind of collaborative working relationships that are not based in hierarchy or power are very helpful in working cross culturally and working kind of across roles in the community. So
Thank you so much for that. I think that is really inspiring for both students and like early maybe researchers. And I understand the importance of like collaborating with researchers and also with community partners.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's like the service the organization is doing, it has to benefit them. It has to benefit their clients. And so the research needs to be a part of that. It needs to support that rather than taking away from that. So as a researcher, we have to be willing to learn and be humbled and to know that like sometimes we might start in the wrong place. That's okay. We can make shifts and find a way to do our work better. So
thank you so much for that. So another question is, considering current research and literature on forced migration, what gaps do you believe require further exploration?
Yeah, it's a very challenging time for those of us who are very passionate about migration and want to see more refugees coming to the United States or other countries, and we want to see more of a welcoming attitude towards refugees. We want to see better programs that support newcomers and that support forced migrants globally and domestically in the United States. And so I feel like there's a lot of avenues to consider in thinking about how to move that forward. One might be more of attention to public sentiment. Like, how do we create a culture that's more understanding or empathetic or welcoming? There's so much fear and misinformation, misunderstanding, stigma towards migrants, towards refugees. How can we understand and unpack and address that and help people shift towards a more welcoming or inclusive attitude? I think that is not an area that I've been involved in at all, but I think those types of questions could be really interesting in thinking about how do we also help people understand each other and reduce stigma or discrimination on a very like small or kind of micro levels. Um, there's so many things that contribute to the very challenging policy environment that we're in, but as we're trying to navigate through this, there's also questions about what do we want to look like? What do we want services? What do we want policies to look like on the other side? If some of the approaches we've had in the past are problematic or haven't worked, what else is possible? And I think that's brings a lot of exciting questions for the next generation of scholars to help us reimagine what could resettlement look like? What other durable solutions do we need, or how do we implement the durable solutions available to try to make a world that's more safe, more welcoming, more a place where everyone can thrive, regardless of the political persecution or other challenges in their countries. There's also so many new challenges with climate change and things that are going to continue to drive displacement. So I think really looking for ways to maybe reframe some of the definitions or understandings we have about migration or how being a refugee is described or defined. So there's plenty there, plenty to look at, and a lot of needs for creative and collaborative and visionary scholars in the future.
Thank you so much for that. I think that was inspiring, and also it's I think it's so important for scholars like you to like highlight the needs, the gaps that may need to be addressed in the future. So I have one last question. Is there a book related to forced migration? It could be like a biography, novel, or a textbook that you would recommend.
Yeah, so there's an author that has really inspired me. Her name is Kao Kalia Yang. Maybe you've heard of her. She has a refugee background. She is part of the Hmong community in Minnesota, and she writes just so beautifully about the migration experience and also just the lived experience of being a person, honestly. And she writes about her family's experience, her own, as well as the experience of other refugees in the United States. So I love her work. The Late Homecomer is a book about her family. And Somewhere in the Unknown World is a book she has that touches on the experience of many different refugees that I think is a great place to start. She's also an amazing person. I had a chance to meet her in Minnesota a few years ago and just very impressed by her spirit and her presence. So I would definitely recommend her writing.
Thank you so much for your time, and also for like sharing your current work and your experience like with our members. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for meeting with me.
Thank you.